Our next guest on the program is Greens Senator Jordon Steele-John. Thanks very much for your time today, of course, in the midst of this campaigning. I guess we'll start off with your prediction. Where's it all headed?
Well, great to be back with you, Tom. I smell a bit of a hung parliament in the air, to be honest with you, mate.
OK, and that's with, what, Labor with a few more seats than the coalition then, but falling short of a majority?
I think so, on balance. I think that's roughly, you know, we saw similar polling in the run-up to the 2010 election result, if you remember, similar kind of tightness. And so what I think we have a great opportunity here is to actually create the perfect electoral incentives for the strong climate action that we know the community is demanding, because that's exactly what we were able to take with Greens in the Senate and in the lower house, and independents as well, between 2010 and 2013.
So when you talk up that period, do you think many Australian voters agree that that particular government was a good one, particularly given what happened in 2013?
Indeed. I mean, I think that people make the distinction, Tom, between the good policy outcomes that were won in that period of time, more legislation passed since the Second World War, the NDIS, the Clean Energy Future Package, and the internal leadership instability of the Labor government. By the end of its term, things like the carbon price package, the NDIS, Gonski school funding, these are still the debates that we are having in this election now, really. So it did set the policy agenda. Labor just buggered itself up by falling into internal nonsense.
But you don't think, broadly speaking, with voters, you need to be a bit careful about saying, hey, here's what they're heading for, vote for us because we'll get 2010 again?
No, I don't think so at all. I think what people want us to do is compromise, Tom. They want us to come together, stop this silliness of going, you know, my stick's bigger than yours, and get down to the business of getting outcomes for the community. That's what the Greens are focused on. We've in WA been campaigning on the issue of climate change, and that's exactly what the community want us to see us do.
So if your prediction happens and we've got Labor just short of a majority, Labor's already said no formal alliance again with the Greens has happened last time. They've been pretty clear on that. Would the Greens be happy to give supine confidence without anything formal, without anything set in return for that?
Well, that's, I mean, it's just, I think this is just silly from Bill Shorten. I mean, it's not up to him, it's not up to Richard, it's not up to me as to what the composition of the Parliament is. It's up to the Australian people. Now, if the Australian people decide to give nobody a majority, they decide to elect a Labor government and give Greens balance of power in the Senate and, you know, more independents and Greens in the lower house, then it's Bill's responsibility to sit down and work with that arithmetic. I mean, that's just the adult nature of the situation. And I really wish that we get to a point where, as I say, we could stop this self-interested, oh no, I will do this, I won't do this, when everybody knows that the minute the polls close, people will actually get down to the reality of forming a government and getting stuff done.
Well, on that, I mean, Tanya Plibersek has said that this is a reality, if there's a minority, that, of course, they would have to work with the crossbench, and look, they'll have to do that regardless in the Senate, but there is still this question of the formal alliance. Now, again, Labor's been pretty clear on that. So would the Greens be happy to give the supine confidence you can work on any bit of legislation and nothing would really pass without your help, unless the coalition helped them out? Would the Greens be happy to give that supine confidence on those terms?
Well, this is a bit of a rhetorical oddity for the Labor Party. I mean, what we had between 2010 and 2013 was exactly that. It was an agreement around confidence and supply, and there are a couple of key policy areas that we negotiated over to come to that agreement. I mean, that is the situation. So I can see the reasons why Tanya and the Labor Party would be trying to crab walk rhetorically away from this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, people are sick of the nonsense. They actually just want us to get on with acting on climate change, and that's exactly what a vote for the Greens on Saturday means.
And so, just to really clarify this, though, obviously you're saying, you'd push for policy outcomes, but supine confidence you would give to Labor without necessarily being partners, if you like.
But we weren't. This is the misconception around 2010 to 2013. We weren't officially partners. That we came to an agreement.
There was a deal, though, for
confidence
example, on the carbon tax that you said we won't form government unless that policy was enacted. So that's what I'm saying. You can deal on policy separately, is what Labor's saying, but would you give them supply and confidence without a quid pro quo in of itself?
I'm sorry to disagree with you, Tom, but actually what happened in 2010 was we had an agreement to create something called the Multi-Party Climate Change Committee, which was actually open to every member of Parliament, regardless of colour, to come and sit down with experts and develop a climate policy that worked. That was what was in the agreement, along with other things as well. And Richard's made it really clear that we will seek a mandate from the Australian people to take strong action on climate change and then sit down with whoever, wins. We hope Bill Shorten. And, see what we can do for the planet and for the Australian community.
So the point remains, though, that when there was this deal with the Labor Party last time, there was a quid pro quo for that support. Will that need to happen again? Is that what you're saying, that you'll need something concrete for the supply and confidence?
Well, we'd enter a negotiation, and usually when you're negotiating, something comes out of that. But at the end of the day, mate, I'm focused on the next 2 days actually having that conversation with the electorate, because at the end of the day, that is what then commands what happens after. There's all of this pre-match analysis that goes on, but actually we are public servants, and our job is to listen to the result that comes out at the end of the day and try and make it work for the people that voted for us and the communities that we serve.
Okay.
And that's what I'll be working to do here in WA.
I want to go to one policy area just to get an idea of how much you'd be willing to bend. Obviously, Labor's negative gearing changes, which the Greens do support. How would you be if it was watered down by demands of the rest of the Senate and, say, perhaps they were asking for a cap on negative gearing? Are you willing to be, as part of that compromise, you wouldn't insist on the policy as is for your support?
Well, I don't think that makes sense, to be honest with you, Tom. We have a reality, and I know this. I'm 24. I've got many friends, staring down the barrel of never being able to own or affordably rent their own home. We've got an artificially inflated housing market here in Australia, and both sides of politics are guilty of advocating policies that will actually make it worse. We need to be investing in public, rent-controlled housing here in Australia. We have a plan to create 500,000 over the decade so that we can actually give people roofs over their heads again. This horse trading around negative gearing, it is part of the policy change that we need, but it is nowhere near enough to solve the housing crisis in Australia, and we need to think big. But
it's a pretty big part of it in terms of Labor's mandate, is what I'm saying. It looks almost certain to be altered by the Senate. So I'm just trying to get an idea for what the Greens will do there if you're going to go for policy, to the nth degree and try to achieve purity.
We will advocate for our policy, Tom. I mean, negative gearing is one of these things that doesn't really have a social licence in this country. It has a licence to be advocated for by the property development end of the market, who give large donations so that both sides of politics have jittered around it for years. We need to get a grip of that bit, solve it, and then once we've done that, move on to investing in public housing, which is where this debate should be.
The capital gains tax, obviously, the change to that was not so long ago, but negative gearing, when you say it doesn't have a social licence, well, it's been in the country for decades.
Yeah, but it serves no public good. It's an aberration in the sense that it combined with capital gains tax exemptions to artificially inflate the housing market. It's never been tied in any way, shape or form to the creation of affordable or sustainable housing. It doesn't serve the purpose of making sure that people have a roof over their head. It makes that less possible, and beyond a small element of wealthy folks and property developers, it's not on the top of people's mind. What's on the top of people's mind is affordable rent, and that is what the Greens are advocating at the election.
I want to ask you finally about the NDIS. There's still quite a number of stories coming out concerning about the rollout. Now, Labor's pledging more money in this hypothecated fund. Is that going to fix it, or is there an internal or intrinsic error with it? Because if it's the latter, it's a big issue to fix, and you've got to do it quite quickly as well, presumably, because people are in there hoping to be part of this scheme.
Absolutely. I mean, no, what Labor has produced as a policy here won't fix the NDIS. What needs to happen with the scheme is a person with a lived experience to take it over as CEO. There needs to be renewal in the board and a new chair of the board as well, so that we get rid of a lot of the corporate types that have sneaked in there under the coalition. And then we need to do three things. It needs a new bespoke IT system, which it always should have had rather than Centrelink 2.0. They need to uncap the staffing of the agency, and they need to urgently retrain staff. And those are the things that need to be done. And to be honest with you, mate, the NDIS is a story of what happens when you try to create a scheme for disabled people without it being led in design by disabled people. And that's why I'm so keen to keep working on the NDIS over the next 6 years, because I really do think you need lived experience in the Parliament, in the scheme, to make it work.
Jordon Steele-John, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.